So, about 2 weeks ago I posted a Q&A on this YouTube channel talking about me, my work and so forth, but I promised you a second part, all about pro cycling, starting off by answering your questions about the 2025 pro cycling season and then trying to predict everything that will happen in this season. So yeah, this should be fun. On to the first question, was the 2024 cycling season too predictable? Like, I think we can all agree it was predictable because, well, most of the big races were won by the favorites. But it's not just that, it's also the way those races were won. Liège-Bastogne-Liège, RVV, Roubaix, Il-Lombardia, World Championships Road Race. They were all won in a long solo that was looking like it was gonna win from the second they attacked. Everyone talks about witnessing greatness, but if that happens every single week, I'm sorry, but it gets boring. Especially because my favorite races of all time that I've watched are the ones where I'm literally on the edge of my seat until the end. I think the perfect example is Paris-Roubaix 2012 versus Paris-Roubaix 2016. In 2012, Tom Bonnen had a super dominant classic season, winning Roubaix with a majestic solo. But 2016, despite being a Belgian that's invested in Bonnen, the race where he lost from Matthew Hayman after a brutal battle between 6-7 riders for the last 15 kilometers, I'm sorry, but that's by far the best Paris-Roubaix I've ever seen. So yeah, in my opinion, the 2024 cycling season was too predictable, not just the monuments, also the Grand Tours. Because personally, I'd much rather have a fight until the absolute last kilometer than a race that's decided 40 kilometers from the finish line, and sometimes decided before the race even starts. What are you most looking forward to in the 2025 pro cycling season? Honestly, the first thing that comes to mind is women's cycling. We just had a fantastic transfer season. Basically, before 2025, the best team in the world is D-Works, had the best sprinter, the best classics rider, and the best GC rider. And in this transfer season, the best GC rider, who, in my opinion, is the best GC rider by quite a bit, has decided to leave that team and balanced out World Tour a little bit. So yeah, that's what we like to see in cycling, seeing the best riders in different teams to see them fighting each other. Well, fighting, not physically, but on the bike. So yeah, Demi Vollering leaving as D-Works is a massive thing for the sport and I think it's gonna give us great racing. Now, in men's cycling, I'm most looking forward to the last half an hour of Milano-San Remo because it's the monument that is the least likely to be won by a massive solo by the favorite. Will UAE Team Emirates finally try to launch Pogačar on the Cipressa, something that is deemed impossible? That team is the key to how selective Milano-San Remo is. And if it's not selective, it could literally be won by an outsider on the final stretch. Ooh, this is a big question. Do you think that Vingegaard has a chance to win the Tour de France? I think the simple answer is yes, but based on 2024, Pogačar was super dominant. The gap to Vingegaard was significant. And during that Tour de France, despite the injuries that came before, Jonas did perform his best power to weight ratios of his entire career. But that doesn't mean it's the best possible power to weight ratios he could have done. Personally, I think it's a logical assumption to make that without the crash at Basque Country, Jonas would have had a better preparation for that Tour de France and could have been even better. But would that even better have been enough to beat Pogačar? I don't think so. So yeah, in the end, Vingegaard has a chance to win the Tour de France, but in my opinion, it's unlikely. But I hope it's as close as possible because, well, I'm here for the action. Who will podium the Tour de France 2025? Well, I basically already said it. I think Pogačar is gonna beat Vingegaard at the Tour de France because it's such a major gap last year that I think Vingegaard will be closer to Pogačar, but getting past him, it's hard to see that happen. When it comes to the third place, there's two names coming to mind, Evenepoel and Roglic, both with question marks. Evenepoel coming back from the injury, Roglic coming from the Giro, so how will his form be? Now, I do think Remco Evenepoel will come back with decent form from his injuries, and I think he's gonna win 4 time trials this season, Dauphiné, Belgian ITT, Tour de France and Rwanda, but when it comes to the podium in the Tour de France, my gut says no, but I'm gonna put him on third because for some reason my head has confidence in him, but my gut doesn't. I guess we'll see which body part is right. Do you expect teams to try new tactics in 2025 to counter Pogačar's dominance? Actually, I think we already saw a behavior change last year, for example at Il-Lombardia. The other teams in the peloton knew it was unlikely to beat Pogačar in the final of the race, so they decided to make a strong breakaway at the start with proper riders. Basically, they tried putting pressure on UAE Team Emirates as a team instead of Pogačar alone. And now, in the end, it didn't work out because the team of UAE was very strong that day, but the behavior change was there. So yeah, I do expect teams to try new things against Pogačar and UAE in 2025, but at the end of the day, there's a limit to how much you can do against the best rider in the world in the best team in the world. Okay, we got a question from the Portuguese Armada. Do you think Almeida is still waiting for Ayuso to relay? I'm gonna give you a hot take on this one. I think Ayuso is getting way too much shit for this because the 2023 Vuelta, I'm sorry, he was fighting for the podium for the Vuelta, and who was in the back of the group not doing anything for Ayuso? Joao Almeida, thinking about his own GC. Next to that, in that same Vuelta on the Beches climb, Vingegaard attacks, makes a gap. How does the UAE team car respond? By attacking with a domestique Finn Fisher-Black towards Jonas Vingegaard instead of setting tempo behind Vingegaard for Juan Ayuso, their podium candidate. Why would Juan Ayuso care about working for someone else if no one else in the team is willing to work for him when he's leader in the team? Now, on the Col du Galibier and in that Tour de France 2024, Almeida did do more work than Ayuso for Pogačar, but he also wasn't the perfect domestique. He also was domestiquing with his own GC in mind. So instead of bragging with the domestique work of Joao Almeida, why not look at someone like Adam Yates, who throws away his GC to work for Pogačar? Out of Ayuso, Almeida and Yates, Yates is the exemplary teammate. Who will be the best sprinter in 2025? I feel like the best sprinter has evolved quite a few times over the last couple of years, because in 2023, it was Jasper Philipsen. In 2024, there were 3 riders at the top: Milan, Merlier and Philipsen. And in my personal opinion, Milan and Merlier eclipsed Philipsen in 2024 if we take a look at pure sprints. Milano-Sanremo, that's a different thing. Looking towards 2025, I think a lot will depend on their success at the Tour de France and whether they compete in the Tour de France to begin with. Tim Merlier has been announced to be at the Tour de France. Jonathan Milan, I'm not sure, because if he rides the Tour de France, he might cannibalize the green jersey points of Mats Pedersen. So I've got a bit of a conditional answer to this. If Milan is at the Tour de France, he's gonna be the best sprinter of 2025. But if he's not, then I think it's gonna be Tim Merlier. Anyway, that was the Q&A part of this video, but now we're gonna do something different. I'm just gonna throw a couple of predictions for the 2025 pro cycling season at you, and I want to hear your opinion. Number 1, Luke Plapp wins the men's Santos to Down Under. Now, I'm slightly biased because he's a friend of mine, but he crashed during the 2024 edition while performing a lead out for Caleb Ewan, and I think he's gonna want revenge. Because last year, before the crash, he looked like the best rider, and to be honest, Willunga Hill really fits him. And in my heart, I still think about the old days where Richie Porte was destroying Willunga Hill, and then in 2020 or 2021, there was a Santos festival during COVID where they both showed up, Porte and Plapp, and Porte maybe gifted or Plapp won ahead of Porte on Willunga Hill, and it felt like, I don't know, giving the torch to his apprentice. So yeah, in my headcanon, Plappy should be the new king of Willunga Hill. My second prediction, Arnaud Delis wins Omloop at Nieuwsblad. Last year he was one of the strongest riders in that race, ended up having a shit sprint at the end, but during the race itself, in the attack, one of the strongest. But after Omloop, it kind of all went sideways during the classics, and I do expect him to be a lot better this year. Lyme disease was said to be the cause last year for the trouble, but I think he was just mentally struggling a bit. Basically, I think 2024 Delis walked, so 2025 Delis could run. Lawrence Piffy podiums Milano-Sanremo. I feel like Piffy's kind of an oceanic version of Mats Pedersen, but in a different way. He's a versatile classics rider with great 5-minute power and a proper sprint. Sprint worse than Mats Pedersen, but maybe a bit more versatile. Like, I don't expect Piffy to be able to follow the attacks of Pogačar, Van der Poel and so forth on the Poggio, or on the Cipressa if Pogačar decides to do that, but I think in the second group he can survive and maybe podium. Basically the way Michael Matthews does it. Now in 2025 there's also a women's version of Milano-Sanremo Donne, and I think Lotte Kopecky will win that. Her climbing has improved significantly, and on paper Cipressa plus Poggio should not be a problem. If anything, dropping Lorena Wiebes from her own team will be the main focus. On to prediction number 5, Sophie van Rooyen wins a World Tour sprint. Now you might not know Sophie van Rooyen, 22 years old, moved from Volker Wessels to UAE team ADQ, but she actually top 5'd like half her race days in the sprint in 2024, scoring over 1,300 UCI points. If you asked me right now to name any female cyclist that could compete with Charlotte Kool and Lorena Wiebes in the future as a top sprinter, I would name Sophie van Rooyen. Next up, pretty simple one, Tadej Pogačar wins the Ronde van Vlaanderen. My reasoning is quite simple really. The amount of consecutive altitude meters in the Ronde van Vlaanderen is so excessive that I think Pogačar has an inherent advantage on Van der Poel. And like Wout van Aert usually gets dropped by Mathieu van der Poel on this parkour, so I don't expect him to follow Pogačar. My next prediction is a bit of a Captain Obvious. Demi Vollering wins the Tour de France Femme, but I wanted to talk about it. It is just important to remember that 2 years ago, Demi Vollering destroyed everybody. And last year, 2024, she basically had her team fuck her over, which led to her losing the Tour de France Femme. So yeah, in 2025, if FDJ Suez properly supports her, she should destroy everyone in GC. Now, I think my Danish viewers might not like my next prediction, but I fear that Pogačar also wins La Vuelta 2025. Now, I gotta say, Pogačar and Vingegaard both have not been confirmed for the Vuelta, but I want them to be there, so they better be. And also, I think it's time for Pogačar to show up for the Tour Vuelta double, and Jona as well. I think he'll want 2 chances to win a Grand Tour. Anyway, my first argument, there's a team time trial in this Vuelta, and I think UAE Team Emirates around Pogačar has one of the stronger time trial teams, and maybe the strongest time trial setup on the flat. Now, taking a closer look at the mountains at La Vuelta 2025, well, there's a lot of Unipuerto stages, basically stages with a single mountain at the end or limited climbing before the last mountain. And there's almost no stages with like 3 out-of-category climbs. That just doesn't exist this Vuelta. Now, based on 2024, you'd say that Pogačar is better at any mountain stage, regardless of what it looks like. But if you're Jonas, you'd at least want a mountain stage that looks like one that you've already beaten Pogačar on in the past. Something like Col du Granon, multiple mountains, a lot of altitude meters, something crazy. And honestly, I just don't see that in this Vuelta. Talking about the Vuelta, I think that's where Paul Magnier wins his first Grand Tour stage. Like, there's no confirmation that he's actually gonna be at the race, but I want him to ride La Vuelta. There's limited sprint stages in the race, but the ones that are there are versatile, so Paul Magnier as a versatile sprinter would fit perfectly. And like, the man is literally only 20 years old, so he's got a proper growth margin ahead of him. Ben O'Connor does not top 5 a Grand Tour in 2025. We have to start by acknowledging that Ben O'Connor had a fantastic season in 2024. 4th at the Giro, 2nd at La Vuelta. And like, at the Giro he was sick, so he might have been able to fight for that top 3 if he wasn't sick. But at La Vuelta he was not one of the best climbers, but he benefited a lot from gaining 6 minutes in a breakaway. That being said, I think it's realistic for O'Connor to top 5 the Giro and maybe fight for the podium, but he's gonna focus on the Tour de France, where I just don't see him competing for that top 5. Tom Pidcock, who recently left Ineos for Q36.5, wins 0 World Tour races in 2025. First of all, I'm actually happy that Pidcock and Ineos departed because, well, I think they're both in a less toxic environment now. But for me, Tom Pidcock is stuck in that outsider category for World Tour races, and with a team as weak as Q36.5, I just don't see him winning high-level World Tour races. Now, my last prediction is a bit of a hot take. Remco Evenepoel leaves Soudal Quickstep at the end of 2025, joining Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe. Basically, right now, Remco Evenepoel's contract runs out at the end of 2026 with Soudal Quickstep. This means that the end of 2025, the transfer season, is the last opportunity for Soudal Quickstep to get buyout money for Remco Evenepoel. If not, he would most likely be leaving Soudal Quickstep for free because he's out of contract at the end of 2026. And if you're Soudal Quickstep, you might want that multi-million surplus buyout money to rebuild the team for the post-Remco era. Now, why Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe? First of all, Primož Roglic's contract ends at the end of 2025, so it is the perfect time for the team to replace an aging GC rider in Roglic with Remco Evenepoel, a younger rider that might have a extra growth margin, but is on similar level already. Next to that, if you're Remco Evenepoel and you're looking at Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe and Ineos, well, Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe is on an upwards trajectory, Ineos on a downwards one. But the team's bike sponsor is also quite important. Remco has a personal deal with Specialized, and the team of Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe rides on Specialized, so that's a perfect combination. Now, Ineos also does not have that problem because, well, their Pinarello sponsorship ends at the end of 2025, so they would also be able to sign with Specialized for 2026 on paper. And, well, Pidcock left, so there's more money to maybe sign Remco Evenepoel, but I'm personally leaning towards Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe. Now, there's one thing that does not fit with my hot take of Remco leaving, and that's that the sponsors of the team of Soudal Quickstep also sponsors Remco's personal youth team. So I don't know if those sponsors would still be willing to support Remco's youth team if he's not on the Soudal Quickstep team. But hey, that seems like a pretty minor thing to work out, so I think Remco's leaving. Anyway, I want your opinion on every single answer I gave and also on every single one of my predictions. What do you think? But for now, that's the end of today's video. A bunch of rambling about pro cycling, which is exactly what I love doing. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!